The Sandman works because it's a family drama. How do we serve those things with the more fantastical elements? I'm Alan Heinberg. I'm one of the writers and the showrunner of Netflix's The Sandman, and we're going behind the scenes with Collider. I wanted to try to preserve as much of the comics as possible. I wanted to not change things unless we absolutely had to. The focus of the show was very different from the focus of the comic in that our show is about the character of Dream and what he's thinking and feeling and doing at all times. And so that is the sort of lens through which I looked at the comic. Any changes we made were to make the show more dream-focused and dream-centric. I wanted to respect and embody, especially the more iconic moments from the comic, do them in a way that, obviously were supported by the medium of film, but in some ways bring them to life in a way that evoked what the comic books did in the fans, but then even more so. And luckily, everybody on the team, all of the HODs, the heads of the departments, felt the same challenge. Like, how do we make it the comic and then even more so? Not in terms of scale, but in terms of the way it makes you feel. But it was always like, how did I feel when I first read this moment in the comics? That's the target, that's the goal. And then all of our creative forces are trying to realize that in a way that makes sense on screen.
This is Sandman being made for people who love Sandman by people who love Sandman.
The battle between Dream and Azazel in episode 3. In the comics, it's so much easier to do because you've got as big a screen as you want and all the special effects. So just try to break down what the beats of that are and how you choreograph it, like not only psychologically, but then like physically. And then you've got to add a VFX component to it. We just released a VFX breakdown of that scene as well, which sort of shows you how much work and time and energy went into every frame of that. So it required breaking it down on the page, but then we ended up having a long rehearsal the weekend before we shot it where we blocked that entire sequence so that everything is sort of there. So those big VFX heavy, SFX heavy moments are mostly the biggest lifts. The back half is mostly more emotional than anything else. We had fewer of those like big VFX heavy set pieces. In episode 10, you've got that entire stony cliff sequence where you've got the Furies waiting for Dream to end his life, and you've got Death and you've got Dream there, and it's raining and it's this impossible location, and how are we going to do that? That became a very daunting challenge just scenically, but then our set designer, our production designer sort of figured out that he could build it on stage and we could have rain on stage and we could control the environment, and a lot of it was VFX. The setting is a fantasy setting and the world is a fantasy world, but the nice thing about this property and the reason that I think it has had the life and the success that it's had since the 80s is because all the emotions are human and real. So there's a real psychology, there's emotional depth here. The Sandman works because it's a family drama. So my approach is always sort of relational. It's always about how do we reveal elements of this relationship or elements of this character. And then the sort of fantastical elements you almost take for granted because the universe provides those. It's more the psychology of the characters, the emotional lives of the characters, why they're doing what they're doing, why they're saying what they're saying, and what they're not saying. In every aspect of this show, whether we're talking about costumes or sound design or set design, it's always sort of character first. Here's what the character wants, here's what the story is, how do we serve those things with the more fantastical elements? In the first season, we had very few what I would describe as standing sets, where you've got sound stages and you've got sets that you use in every episode and you could amortize the cost of them over the number of episodes. And it's the way you make television in a smart, sensible way. Because every episode of season 1 was its own little movie, there were very few sets that we could reuse. Dream's throne room was one that we kept returning to, but we actually had a real cathedral as our set, which was incredibly expensive. So we redesigned in season 2 so that Dream's throne room was a standing set that we expanded through VFX, and that worked out great for us because we did keep going back to the throne room. Other standing sets were the front doors to the palace, that lobby with the stairs going up, the strip club that Dream and Delirium visit in episode 4 was a set. But I would say we were a 50-50 show in terms of how much we built on set and how much we went outside for. Joanna Constantine's cell in 16th century France was like 7 different things, including the Fates cottage, including the Furies cottage. Like, our production team just kept turning things around as we would need them. And we shot out of order so that we could maximize the amount of time we would spend in one set before we had to turn it over and make it something else. So Destruction's villa in Greece was on stage. The hotel where Joanna and the Corinthian meet, Puck, on stage. But a lot of times we were out in London and out in the countryside, and ancient Greece was all the English countryside and Durdledore, and it was about half and half. You have to have incredible casting directors, Lucinda Sison, who were somehow not intimidated by how weird this show is, and who really understood the sort of essence of each of these characters. And luckily, because Neil Gaiman and the Sandman was such an established brand, it had a lot of fans in that community of actors who loved the book or loved these characters and really wanted to be part of it. And so it made casting this show relatively easy. Adrian Lester, whom I've always admired and wanted to work with, knows the comic back to front. And he didn't even audition. We just met with him and he was like, I would love to play Destiny. And that was that. Same when Freddie Fox was available, I immediately knew, okay, now I know who Loki is. And when we approached Jack about Puck, it changed who I thought Puck was in a way that changed the entire storyline. Like, putting them together and making them a couple, a romantic couple, wasn't something that happened until after we had cast both of them. So a lot of times it's actors who I really want to work with and the team really wants to work with, and they would be great for the part, but the part changes because of who they are. I love writing for actors. Ferdy we cast as Hob Gadling, and he very much influenced the way that Hob was written for the rest of that. I think it's probably true of everybody. You work with people, you socialize with them, you get to know them, and it helps bring these people to life in ways that you wouldn't otherwise. The same with Douglas Booth as Clerican. Like, the more time I spent with Doug, the funnier Clerican got. And the same with Anne Skelly as Nuala. So I think we got very lucky.
We are right on time. Skip the pomp, cut to the party.
Our Nuala is very different from the Nuala in the comic books, and I love her. I did not know exactly how we were going to pull off the Nuala arc. There were things about the comic that I wasn't comfortable with and wanted to change, but I didn't know how we were going to change them. And then meeting Anne and working with Anne and basically saying, like, this Nuala isn't a passive character. She's not in love with Dream. I want to put a sword in her hand. I want to put a bow and arrow in her hand. I want to get her on horseback. That was exciting to me. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. And the same with Loki and Puck. Like, there's so much in the comic that is not revealed about how they're together and why they're together. And so to make it this love story, this like two gay dads romance, and how do you deal with having a kid, it was very unexpected to me. Would not have happened if we had not cast those two actors. And I loved it. And I thought it was sexy and I thought it was playful, and they became my favorite couple to write. Same with Joanna and the Corinthian, which is not in the comics. Like, putting them together and knowing I wanted to create a romantic dynamic between the two of them changed everything. So there are a lot of big differences in the back half of the season from the comic, but all of them were really exciting to us and a lot of fun to write. So I'm excited for longtime fans of the comics to see the changes, and I hope be on board with them.
So this was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.